Hello, friends, it's Mike Williams. As I'm working through the wrapping up of my ongoing Paul is Dead reporting, I will be releasing outtakes of interviews that I believe are of interest to my audience. One of these conversations is this video, where Vince Russo and I chatted for a bit after finishing up the show we did on the wrestling business. I will leave the link to that interview in the description box below. With this clip, I reflect back on my experiences and offer my opinion on various aspects of my Paul is Dead journey. And so, without further ado, here's the discussion with Vince.
Mike, I want to ask you two things.
Yeah.
When I look at, like, from my point of view, okay, Vince, like, why do you really believe this? You know, what is the one thing that makes you really believe this compared to the contrast of what is the one thing that really makes you not believe it? Okay. The one thing that I've said over and over and over again that makes me believe is, okay, all the clues, the backmasking, the album covers, they're all there. They exist. Okay, there's no question about that. I Buried Paul was not cranberry sauce. They exist.
Yeah.
So I lived my whole life thinking, okay, it's a publicity stunt. They wanted to sell more albums. They eventually will come clean with it. You know, I mean, when, Paul, Billy, Ringo, like when they're in their 70s, does it matter? Like, does it matter if Ringo says, hey, man, the Rolling Stones were really coming on, bro. We had to sell some records. Does it matter? I don't think anybody would ever have an issue with it. I really don't. So my whole life I'm waiting for, okay, guys, it was a big publicity stunt. Bro, that never happened. To this day, nobody has said it was a publicity stunt, but yet all the stuff is there. It's all there. It was purposely done. Bro, we get back to the scene, that Abbey Road picture I sent you, like when he said on Letterman, bro, it was a hot day, so I kicked off my shoes. Okay, bro. First of all, when it's a hot day, that means the pavement is the hottest. So you kicked off your shoes to walk across the hot pavement. But then, bro, when you see the pictures before they took the shot, he's actually wearing sandals.
Right.
So, like, he's not even wearing shoes. You're wearing sandals. So now you break it down even further. Okay, bro. So you were wearing sandals with a suit? No, bro, you weren't wearing sandals with a suit. That was going to be the shot. You were going to be barefoot. That was the shot. So, like, again, you have the opportunity to say it was a publicity stunt, but yet you just tell this harebrained story that doesn't make any sense. So that's what I look at as, okay, bro, like, come on, like, what the hell's going on? But then the other part that's really tricky, and you and I have discussed this, the acrostantial is real. That's really tricky for me. Even though, Mike, I got to tell you, bro, since I got turned on to you, I own practically every Bonzo album. Bro, there's a lot of songs that relate to this he was doing is that you haven't even touched upon. But there are some lyrics that are like, wait a minute, bro, like, is it coincidental? So my question to you is, what would be the one thing, if you had to put your stamp on that one thing, like, this is why this is Billy? And the one thing that may stick in your craw a little bit about, I don't know if I can really make sense out of that. What are those two things?
Well, it is the fact that they don't look alike. That's the thing that puts the ball over the goal line for me, Vince. People want to say, oh, he looks exactly the same way and he sings the same way and all this stuff. It's not true. So when people say that to me or they want to respond that way in comments, I know that they haven't done any homework. I know they haven't done any research. So, I've looked at enough pictures now that, I know who's Billy. And when it's not him, that's the main point, is they do not look alike. Do they resemble each other? Yes. They obviously resemble each other because that's what it was all about, was to get him to look as much like biological Paul as they possibly could. But does he look exactly like him? No, he does not. The thing that I guess bothers me the most about the whole conspiracy is the fact that, I really didn't want to believe it. I was like you. I thought it was a publicity stunt to sell more records. And as I think I mentioned in your show, they did indeed sell more records once
Hmm.
the conspiracy came out back in 1969. Beatle records sales popped because, my whole life as a musician and as a guitar player was spent as the Beatles as my foundation, as my baseline. So to pop that bubble, that wasn't an easy thing. That's why I laugh sometimes. And when people say that I'm a Beatle hater or, I love Fall McCartney, and I hear all this nonsense. It's just adolescent nonsense. And I think to myself, no, I didn't want to be a Beatle hater. I didn't even know that Fall existed. I thought it was a marketing ploy, So when all this stuff came together back in 2016 and I started looking into it, it was very hard to get my head wrapped around. It was a hard pill to swallow. So there's that part of me sometimes that thinks, it just was a lot better the way it used to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because it was a more simplistic way of looking at the world. It's the Cinderella story. It says four lads from Liverpool made it big, and they were brilliant songwriters and all this stuff. And then then I have to take a step back and I say, but Mike, you've shown, and I believe conclusively, that very little of that story is true. Very little of it. In fact, one of the things I'm working on next, and I've already, the guns are pointing at me, Vince, and what I'm going to present is the fact that they did not write all of their own music.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they didn't write any of their own music. So I want to make that very clear. I'm saying that they didn't write all of their own music. And the way it came about was because I watched, this is the first time I'm going to show this. There was this DVD. Okay.
Oh, okay. Wow. I've never seen that before.
The premise, and by the way, this is a sanctioned DVD. This is somebody that is presenting this that loves the Beatles. They're giving us the Beatles story, the official Beatle narrative. So this is not a hit piece on the Beatles, but basically it goes like this. The Beatles just came off hectic touring. They had to go into the studio. They had to write from scratch because they didn't have a backlog to speak of. 14 songs in 30 days. 14 songs in 30 days. That means write the songs, record the songs, mix the songs, master the songs, get the LP jackets prepared, labels prepared for the 33 RPM records, and have that record out 3 weeks later. But here's the problem. The problem is that every songwriter I have spoken to so far, and some of the folks that I'm connected to are professional songwriters. They're in the business. And they have said it's not possible to get those songs written, recorded, mixed, and mastered in 30 days. They said it's just not possible. Because the way songwriting works, Vince, because I'm a songwriter, is that when you sit down to write a song, you may complete that song, you may not. In other words, you may start a song, have an idea, and you think to yourself, oh, this is not working. Right? So there are starts and stops, and stuff that you put on a shelf and so on. You'll write lyrics and you're thinking, oh, I don't know, those lyrics sounded okay yesterday, but today, I don't know. So you have all of this going on, this dynamic going on. The story they want to sell to the public is the Beatles came in after they got done touring, sat down, wrote these songs without blinking. There was no puts and takes. There was no false starts. There was no, I don't know about these lyrics. Everything just came together miraculously, like magic. And the other thing that I try to get across to folks is that when we go back to the Beatles' early recordings, like With the Beatles and their first album, Please Please Me, that was just straightforward rock and roll. A lot of that stuff was cover music. There were Lennon and McCartney compositions as well. But when you take a look at, in 1963, when they released Please Please Me in March of 63, and then you jump ahead to Rubber Soul in 1965, Revolver was in 66, when you take a look at Rubber Soul and you see how much that songwriting evolved over just 2 years, It is unbelievable. It is a leap that any thinking person should pause and look at and say, I don't know about that. That's a gigantic leap. In fact, I was just watching a video this morning that somebody sent me. It was Ringo on the Ellen Show going back to 2015. And in that interview, he said that when the Beatles were touring, one of the reasons why they stopped was because they were becoming lesser musicians, that they were not excelling at their craft, if you will. Right? He said the touring and all that stuff was actually hurting them from a musician standpoint. So I'm thinking to myself, well, that's an interesting thing to say, because you just got off of touring, then you hopped into the studio for 30 days, and you guys allegedly banged out 14 songs like that, no problem. Well, that doesn't mesh. So what happens is we catch these things, right? So you have to be alert. You catch these little anomalies. They're not like just blatant hit you over the head with a hammer types of stuff that you're going to catch. Sometimes it is, but it isn't very often. It's subtle. And so what happens is you see enough material and you start to pick up on these little things. And you think, well, that doesn't map to that, and that doesn't map to this. And before you know it, you start to pick up discrepancies in the story. Why are there discrepancies in the story? Why? It's because it is a story. And that's what people don't understand. It's a narrative. It's like when you did scripts for wrestling. They were scripted. The Beatles story is scripted. People come to me and say, oh, well, so-and-so wrote this book, and he's a Beatle expert. And I said, well, look, what you have to understand is the same people that delivered the music to you, the Beatles, the band, Tavistock, right, are the same people that made sure that the backdrop was there. They made sure that the history was there, and the narrative was there, and the storyline was there. Okay? They just didn't do one variable or one piece of the puzzle. They have to do the whole puzzle. So when you have people who write books, you have one or two things going on. One, they are either in the inner circle, and that's their job, is to perpetuate the story, right? To write the narrative, to keep it going. Or they're not in the inner circle, and they are writers with good intent, but they're relying on source material by the people who wrote it. Right? So they don't know any better. And we all fell into that. I mean, I fell into that. I have tons of Beatle books, Vince, downstairs, and I read them all. And now I look at it, I think to myself, I cannot believe that I read these books and I believed half the stuff that was in there. But at the time, I just soaked it all up. So that show, which is going to come out in October, about them not writing all, I have to be very clear about this, all of their own music, is going to cause a big ruckus in the whole Paul is dead McCartney conspiracy arena, because there are people who are fanatics about this stuff. There are people that are into this research that are in it for social justice for James Paul McCartney. They believe somehow they're going to elevate him and put him back on a pedestal and put him in his rightful place in the annals of rock and roll and so on, when in reality, biological Paul McCartney is a subplot. In other words, he was one of the characters, one of the players that was part and parcel of this entire psychological operation that was created by Tavistock called the Beatles. There are people out there that think that Billy's going to be arrested. It's ridiculous. I tell them, I said, look, Billy's going out with a ticker tape parade, okay? They're going to erect a statue of him at Buckingham Palace. It's going to be 66 feet tall, So this is what they don't understand. A lot of people have a hard time realizing and comprehending, or wanting to believe for that matter, that there are two worlds. There is the world inside the pyramid, which is the controlling mechanism over our reality. And then there's the world outside of that pyramid. Mm-hmm. And people want to believe that the pyramid world doesn't exist, but it does exist. And it's a very, very different world. And it's a realm where they dictate out to the world outside the pyramid as to how things are going to work. They're going to shape your beliefs. They're going to shape your norms. They're going to shape your societies and your cultures, and they're going to get you to agree to certain things, disagree to others. That's what they do. They manipulate reality. And it's only when you wake up to the fact that that dynamic exists, that there are two separate worlds, will you begin to understand how all this really, really works. And, and the Beatles were, don't get me wrong, the music is great. I have all my Beatle albums, Vince. I'm like you. I'm a vinyl collector. I have Beatle vinyl that I collected for over 10 years from all over the world. And I still sit down and enjoy the music, but I listen to it with different ears now. I no longer listen to it putting the same luster around the Beatles as I used to. They're not shined up to me anymore. Now I listen to it because I can appreciate the craftsmanship of the music, what went behind the music, regardless of who it was that actually wrote the song or arranged the song. I can just listen to it from that standpoint, and I'm okay with that now. So anyway, I probably went on a little longer there.
No, that blows my mind, man. Couldn't the argument be made, though, Mike? Could the argument be made that they were working on the album when they were on tour?
I mean, somebody could make that argument, but when you're on tour, it is extremely difficult to sit down and to start writing music. You may have ideas, you may strum a couple of chords here and there, but what people have to realize is from 1963 through 1966, the Beatles toured a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And the Beatles did 2 movies, and the Beatles had unbelievable amounts of photo ops and interviews and stuff like that. So when you pile all that into the equation, right, you throw it into the stew, you think to yourself, well, when did they really have time to write all those songs? Again, I'm not saying they didn't write any songs. They wrote songs, but I don't believe they wrote all of those songs. They had help, and they had help by uncredited songwriters, ringers, people that came in. Here's one for you. Somebody sent me a video, and it's going to be in the presentation in October. And in that video is them working in the studio. They are reading from these binders. I mean, these binders are professional binders. And what's in the binders? Well, best I can tell from looking at the video, it's music and it's lyrics. Where did the binders come from? In other words, when you write a song as a songwriter, you don't say, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write a song and some lyrics, and I'm going to put a binder together for my band. No, what you do is you sit in a room and you say, hey, guys, I wrote this song. I'm going to play it for you. Here are the chords. I've got the lyrics written down. I'll probably change some of them. So here are the chords. It's a rocker. It's a blues. It's E, A, G, whatever. D chord here, whatever it may be. And the band runs through it. You don't create corporate packaging, binders and all that stuff.
Yeah.
The reason why they did all those gigs back in Germany and the Cavern and all that stuff, it was to really, really enhance their chops as far as being able to play music, right? Chords and all that stuff. So they were very good. They were very astute at playing songs. I mean, if you gave them the chords, they could play the chords and all that stuff. So they went through this whole period of time when they were ramping them up to have those playing skills so that when they got into the studio and they were given songs that they didn't write, it didn't take them very long to be able to bang the chords out and to sing it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm sure somebody came in and said, all right, we wrote this song and it's going to be credited to you, Lennon and McCartney. Here are the chords and here are the lyrics, and let us show you the melody. Because none of the Beatles, aside from Billy, could read and write music. Mm-hmm. So you couldn't put sheet music in front of them and say, oh, okay, John or Paul, here's the sheet music and bang it out. They had to be shown. But once they were shown, this is my premise, they were very good at playing it back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think happened. And especially from the 1962 through 1966 period. And then once Billy stepped in, I believe that approach subsided a lot. I think what happened is once Billy got in, then you started to see more of their own original compositions come forth. I'm not saying every once in a while an uncredited songwriter didn't step in and give them a song. I'm not saying that, but I think it was less. Because the amount of songs that the Beatles had to crank out in the early days, Vince, from 63 through 66, they were doing 14 songs an album.
Yeah.
And I have a person that I know, I can't say who this person is, but this person is very accomplished. And I pointed them to that documentary. They watched it. They wrote me back within a few days and said, it's not possible.
Well, too, Mike, when you look at, the fact that they were young, they were millionaires. I don't know if drugs was an influence at that time, but when you look at the fact that they were young, they were millionaires, you don't know if drugs were involved, the type of discipline.
Right.
I mean, come on, the type of discipline it would take.
Right.
It's a hard pill to swallow. Now, do you think Billy would Billy know that? Because my question is, why wouldn't he discuss that in the book?
I think it's because Billy, in his contract, he can only talk about certain things. And most likely what he cannot talk about is that part of the Beatles story. In other words, his contract probably says you cannot talk about the songwriting going outside the four characters, John, Paul, George, and Ringo. You can't talk about that. That you're not open to talk about that yet. And, you know, it's possible, like we know in memoirs, it says that he met the band, he knew them back in 1962. He's introduced to them by Denny Lane. You know, Billy is formally trained. He's a very, very good musician. And he can read and write music. He can score music. I mean, he has his classical compositions. You know, anybody can go online, go take a look, go see what he's capable of. It's possible. I don't have any proof of this, but it's possible that he had a role in the band before 1966 where he might have been one of those professional songwriters, arrangers that were in the background putting things together, you know, and it's, to me, it's not out of the realm of possibility that was done.
You know, it's kind of, man, when you look at the Beach Boys and, you know, when they created, you know, Pet Sounds, the only reason they created that was because Brian Wilson stayed back.
Right.
So while the Beach Boys were on tour touring, he was back spending all that time. And my God, bro, if you watch the movie, I can't think of the name of it, that John Cusack played him. And I mean, yeah, the work that he put in by himself to create that album. And then you look at your window. Yeah, that's a hard pill to swallow.
Well, just look at Sgt. Pepper. It took them 9 months to put Sgt. Pepper together. 9 months. And then we're to believe that Rubber Soul was done in 30 days. Signed, sealed, delivered. Yeah. Big bow slap on top of it. You know, first of all, one of the things, I should mention this, right? So one of my sources got back to me and said, here's the biggest problem of all with a 30-day time frame. I said, what's that? He says, it takes 6 weeks to get the album covers made with the songs on
wow.
it. And the song.
So they would have had already been done. Wow. That's, yeah.
So this person came back to me and said, so Mike, that means the songs were already known. The sequencing of the songs were already known. So they were given the songs that were on the album that were already known and told to play them and record them.
Wow.
I had another person, he spoke to me the other day. He says, Mike, he goes, yeah, you got the album covers. He says, but you got the label on the album. He goes, the same thing applies to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
He says, all that's got to be created. He says, back in the day, and these are people that know how it worked back in the day.
Yeah.
This stuff took time. This wasn't like, you know, you're sitting at your computer and you have, you have a printer and you can print out labels.
Right.
And slap them on vinyl, right? Back in that day, you had to go send them to a printing house.
Yeah.
And have the prints run. So, you know, it's one of those things, Vince, like I said, you know, when I announced that I was going to do this, man, people had me in their crosshairs. And to be honest with you, I'm at the point now where I'm thinking, I've got 3 more shows on this. You know when you reach that point when you know you need to go do something else. And I'm at that point now.
Yeah.
And some people might construe it as, well, the heat got too much in the kitchen for Mike. No, it's not that at all. Okay, because for 3 years, I've been sitting in that very hot kitchen.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of diminishing returns at this point in time, and you have to know when it's time to go do something else.
Yeah.
So I talked about that intuitive feeling that we get. You've had it, I've had it, other people have had it. That's what I have. And I went to my lady, and I said to her, hon, I'm doing these 3 shows, and then I'm stepping aside. If something big happens, significant with Billy, I'll hop back in, but otherwise, I'm going back to my bread and butter channel, and we're going to talk about a lot of different things like I used to. Vince, when I actually came up with that plan and decided this is what I was going to do, I cannot tell you how much relief
I can imagine.
And burden came off my shoulders.
Yeah.
You know? Because sometimes I think to myself, why am I doing this? Like, why am I doing this?
Well, but there's a reason that you're doing it. And we may not know what that reason is, but there's a reason that you're doing it.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I'm doing it. I did it for whatever reason. I'm in it. But, you know, now it's time to step outside of it.
Do you think there'll be another revision or no?
It's possible. Probably yes, because on page 326, where Tom mentions that Billy knows about my YouTube channel because my URL is in the footnote, the way it was worded, the way the footnote was worded was not accurate. So I did a video on it and said, gee, I never said that about Aleister Crowley.
Yeah.
And so Tom connected with me. He goes, Mike, I really apologize. He says, it should have been written better. He says, so he goes, what I'll do is the next time I do some updates, I'll correct it and make sure it properly reflects what was said and what wasn't said. So he apologized for that. And I said, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. I said, I didn't remember saying it. And it was because I didn't.
Yeah.
About the Crowley stuff, right? That he hated Crowley. I never said that.
Now, have you spoken to Tom, or is that just text messages and what you've spoken to him?
I spoke to Tom once. So almost all of our correspondences are email or it might be a PM on Facebook, right? But a lot of times the more detailed types of stuff would be email based. And it was always me asking him a question. So I would read the book and I'm like, I need more clarification on that. Or
what was it often, Mike? How often was that?
Periodically. I would say once every 2 to 3 months.
Okay.
Right. It's like I wasn't writing to him all the time. It's like we weren't pen pals. So what would happen is I would go along the research and then I would hit something and I would think, what is Billy trying to say here? Am I interpreting this correctly? It was always, not always, but most of the time it was me trying to figure out whether I was decoding it properly. Because Billy likes, like as we mentioned in our show, Billy likes puzzles and riddles or he likes for people to figure things out. So I would write Tom and say, okay, so this passage in the book on this page, is this what he's saying? And so Tom would get back to me. So where he could respond, and many times he was able to, he would say yay or nay. He would say, he's really talking about this, Mike, or he's really going in this direction. Okay. And there's other times when he couldn't talk about it. When he couldn't talk about it, he would just omit that question from maybe, let's say I asked him like 4 or 5 questions. I would see that particular question went unanswered. Right. So he would just leave that out. So that was the pattern. The pattern was when he couldn't talk about it, he just wouldn't say anything. That's the way it was. And there was one time, I guess about 5, 6 months ago, that I did get an opportunity to speak to him on the phone. I wanted to talk to him a little bit about the whole Crowley piece, how pervasive it was in the new book, the Blue Book. So we had a conversation. It was about 40 minutes, I would say, 40, 45 minutes we talked. But generally speaking, Tom and I, we both make an effort not to have a false perspective that we are conversing all the time and that we're working together, because none of those things are true.
Do you think there are many people conversing with him outside of you?
There are people that reach out to him. They send him emails. There are people who have written to me and said, I wrote Tom and he wrote me back. But I think it's probably a different level of correspondence, Yeah. I told Tom way back 3 years ago, he couldn't talk about the book. He was going to come on my show to talk about it. Then a week later, he wrote me and said, Mike, I can't do any interviews. Not that he couldn't do my interview. He couldn't do any. So, I don't know this for sure, but what happened was attorneys said, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Even as careful as you want to be, you might say something that's going to jeopardize agreements that you've signed. So, look, I'm not going to tell you you can't do it, but our recommendation is don't do it. So Tom wrote back and said, I can't do this. He says, look, I get requests to talk about the book. If I send them to you, would you consider doing them? And I wrote him back, and I didn't know him very well at this point. And I said to him, well, yeah, I'll consider doing them. I said, but just so you understand, I'm not going to be towing the book's line.
Right.
And I was very clear about that. And I said, because there are things about the book. First of all, when I first read the Red Book, Vince, I was not happy. The deception really got to me.
Mm-hmm.
I was pissed off. I'm like, what is this? So Tom wrote me back, and in all fairness, he said, no, that's fine. I'm not asking you to tow the book's narrative. He says, I'm just saying I get these requests and I can't do anything with them. So if you wouldn't mind considering them, that would be great. And I said, fine, I would consider them. So that's how it started, And the thing is, I'm not all the time favorable toward Billy. This is another thing. People say, oh, you never bash him. Well, first of all, I don't bash him, number one, because I look at this as I'm a researcher. I have to stay neutral and objective.
Right.
It's not about Billy's personality. It's about what was done and how it was done.
Right.
I'm not going to spend my time kicking the crap out of the guy. I mean, what purpose does that serve? He's been there for 53 years. It is what it is. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely, I do.
So I take a different perspective on this thing. I want to know why it was done, how it was done, because that's what really intrigues me more than anything else.
No, you never, ever come across on any of your shows of anything being personal at all. I mean, ever.
No.
Never.
No. I've had people on, Vince, that I don't agree with. I don't agree with, people come on my shows and they want to talk about whatever. I don't want to say what it is because that person might be listening and thinking, he's talking about me. But, they'll bring something up or introduce something, and that's what they've researched, and that's what they believe. I don't believe it, or I'm not. My research indicates something different, but I'm not going to argue with them. My job as a host is to allow them to communicate their research, their findings, and to express themselves.
Right.
And let the audience decide.
Right.
That's how I approach this thing. And I even do it with the Paul stuff, with the McCartney stuff. It's the same thing. People get really, really, really angry with me because I won't jump in one boat or another. I won't piss on Billy's head. So therefore, I have some agenda, or I'm some shill, or, I'm working for somebody.
Yeah.
No, it's called objective reporting. It's what it's called.
Right.
So, so that's where it's all kind of ended up. I would like to do a show where I could talk about the journey. That's what I would like to do. I don't know if I could do that myself. I mean, I'm not going to talk about myself. That's that would seem really weird.
Man, if you're interested in doing something like that, let me know, because before you hang it up, I definitely want to do another interview with you.
Because the journey is very, very, that's the piece of it that I don't talk about it very much. There's the part about being trolled. There's the part about people having a fanaticism. It's like a cult. It's a freaking cult with some people, with cult leaders.
Yeah.
To some degree, you have to deal with it, even if it means that you ignore it, because ignoring something means that that's your way of dealing with something, right?
Right.
And you're constantly being barraged with people attacking you, making stuff up. I mean, it's the most unbelievable thing that people make stuff up. And sometimes it's comical because you're reading and you're thinking, well, that must have come to you in a dream. I don't know where you got that.
Yeah. That happens to me all the time. That's why I'm saying, man, I would love to have that conversation with you.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'll connect with you. We'll do it.
So when do you think, what's the amount of time for you to go through these 3 projects, do you think?
Well, the first one, which is going to be the roundtable, is going to be 3 hours, and then I'll have to edit that show. So that'll take about a day.
What's that going to be in October, I think you said?
Well, I'm going to release that show on September 11th.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah.
Right. That's the date of biological Paul's death, best we can tell.
So you haven't recorded that show yet, have you?
No, Monday. Doing it on Monday. And then Tuesday, I have another 3 hours set aside to chat with Richard Balducci. That'll be a show. And then the one we just talked about, whether they wrote all their own music, that will be late October, no later than November 1st.
I would love to coincide with you, Mike, when you're done in that one last interview. I mean, it would be such an honor for me. I really mean that. No,
great, Vince. Consider it done. It would be great to talk to you about it, because there are not a lot of people out there that you can actually have, a good conversation with.
You just brought something to my attention today like that didn't even dawn on me, because I'm like you, man. I go back, man. Like I said, I learned about this when I was 6 years old. I've been a Beatle fan my whole life. But when you talk about like people thinking that your stance is you actually hate the Beatles, like this has not deterred me from the band any such form.
No.
Like that never even crossed my, because of this, I hate the Beatles. Like the music is the music.
Right.
Whoever created the music is the music, and I am a fan of that music. So, I mean, just that alone blows me away, because I wouldn't think people would perceive it that way.
Well, it's because there are those out there that have been in this research for a longer period of time, right? That's their claim to fame, that they've been doing this longer than Mike. Never mind that Mike has been heads down, and this has been my life from a research perspective for 3 years, right? Because typically the way a lot of this research works, Vince, is, there's a uptick in the research, you're really involved in it. Then, then there's a valley, and it rides for a while, and then you might hop back into it, get a little more information, then it flatlines again, so it's not this like exponentially growing, ramping up of research that you're doing, and that's not how it works. And so what happens is you've got people that put a certain narrative out there, and they like their narrative, and their followers like that narrative. And so when somebody else comes along and says, well, that narrative might not be correct, or here's something a little different, and not me calling them out. In other words, from the sheer fact that I'm just introducing my own ideas and my own thoughts, but they take it as a personal attack. You are personally attacking and questioning their work. No, I'm not.
It's an alternative.
Exactly. I'm doing my own work.
Right.
But there's a fanatical mindset that permeates this whole Paul is Dead community that it's really quite a study, I would think, in the human psyche.
Yeah.
And they get very, very upset by it. I received an email from somebody that was conversing with me on and off for the last, I want to say maybe 2 years or so, periodically. I thought the guy was a decent enough guy. And he proceeds to write in the email that he's going to investigate Tom Uharriet. He's a fraud. He's a hoax. He's this. He's that. I just wrote this person back and I said, you need to be very careful about libel, slander, doxing, stalking, because that's what it's going to amount to.
Yeah.
And, and I said, there are legal ramifications on this type of thing. And let me explain something to you. I said, if you're going to go do something like this, you better be right. Like, you better be ironclad right.
Right.
Because if you're wrong, you and I talked about this. Tom didn't pull this book out of thin air. So there is a machine behind him.
Yeah.
So for anybody who is in their own little world out there, in their own little bubble, that thinks that they're going to go after and damage somebody.
Yeah. And Tom is the storyteller. Somebody's got to tell the story.
Right. So this is the kind of stuff, that just ripples through the community. And it's just stuff that boggles my mind, because for me, never in my wildest dreams would I go after somebody. If I don't agree with somebody, I just don't agree with you.
Yeah.
I mean, if I don't agree with your presentations, I'm certainly not going to sit in front of my screen and play videos. Yeah. What is the psychology behind somebody who doesn't agree with something, becomes agitated by it, angry by it, wants to go home and, punch their wife and kick the dog, and sits there and watches something that gets them into such a state?
Yeah, no, that happens with me all the time from a writing perspective. Oh, you didn't come up with this. You didn't come up with that. And they set out to prove it. And I'm like, if I didn't come up with something, I would not say I did. It's that simple. But yeah, they just go out on this tangent and they're gonna prove something, by God. But the scary thing is they'll do whatever they have to do to prove it.
Yeah. And what they don't realize is that all of the wasted energy that they are spending focused on attacking somebody else or going after somebody else's work, where they could actually push their own work forward by putting that energy behind whatever it is that they want to chase.
Yeah.
The bottom line is this, Vince, for many of these folks, and I'm not, it's a multitude of people. It's not just like one or two people. Whenever I talk about something like this, people think, oh, you're talking about this person. You're talking about, no, you have no idea how many people out there think like this. How do I know? Because I get the emails, I get the PMs, I get the comments.
Yeah.
If I showed you, I could show you the list of nitwits I had to block from my Paul is Dead channel. It's absolutely mind-numbing, right? But here's what bothers them. I have over 1 million watches and listens on my Paul is Dead material. Over 1 million in 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay? They don't like that.
Yeah.
A lot of times people have a problem with success.
Yeah.
They don't like people being successful.
No, I know. Well, here's what they don't like too, Mike. Here's what they really don't like. They see you do the work. When you watch your shows, Mike, you know the work that is involved. Bro, a lot of people do not have that work ethic. And when somebody does that kind of work and they present it and they're not capable of doing it, I think that's where a lot of the hatred comes in.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is hatred. I call the Paul is Dead, a segment of the Paul is Dead community, as a toxic cesspool.
Yeah.
That's how bad it is.
Same in wrestling. It's the same thing in wrestling. It's the same thing. And that's why I don't say anything. Mike, if I go out there and make any comment, no matter what, they're all over it. No matter what I say. That's why I just go out there and promote.
Yeah.
I threw a question out there today. I said, I just got a question. I said, I'm not being negative. I said, I just got a simple question. When we used to write the show, Mike, must-see TV is every show would end in a cliffhanger. Bro, you learned that from Batman 1966.
Right.
Okay, like that's television 101. You end every show in a cliffhanger. They got to tune in the following week. So today in wrestling, every show is a period. The show closes. It's over. There's no need to watch the next week. So I just put out there today. I said, listen, I'm not being negative, but I just don't understand why isn't the show being written with cliffhangers anymore?
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's like what I asked. And I'm like, that's why I don't even put myself out there anymore, man. It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. You have to step back from it, Vince. And like I said, we have to know when it is time to back off. It has nothing to do with, them getting to you, whatever it may be. It's just like, no, I want to have an enriched life.
Exactly. Yes.
You have to break away from that stuff.
Yep.
And you have to raise the bar and be with like-minded people. Be with people that you resonate with.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's where I'm at with it, So
I totally relate to that. But yeah, Mike, please, I'm serious about that. Let me do that last one. I would love to.
Consider it done. It's a deal.
Great, man. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to the next 3 shows, man.